9 minutes past 5 on this Friday afternoon. Let's talk about what's happening with Newstart. If you lose your job, you don't get Newstart straight away. You have to wait from 1 to 13 weeks. And the time that you wait, the length of time that you wait, that is called the liquid assets waiting period. I know, I just saw your eyes glaze over. I had to look it up too. But it's a term that refers to any funds that you or your partner have that are readily available. So money that your employer owes to you, money that you have saved. And the federal government wants to increase that maximum waiting time to up to 6 months, so from 13 weeks to 26 weeks. And Linda Burney, the Shadow Minister for Families and Social Services, says, well, that's cruel and that is reckless. Linda Burney, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Narelle. That's some detour.
Yes, it is, isn't it? A 9-hour detour. Yeah, can you imagine adding 9 hours to your journeys? I know. Linda Burney, let's run through the figures first. So the government isn't saying that everyone will have to wait 6 months under this proposal. How much would a person have to have in liquid assets before the government says you need to wait 6 months?
The government is saying that something like 40,000 Australians on Newstart could be impacted. And I know that people's eyes do glaze over when you start using terms like liquid assets test. But it's so very, very important. The government not only wants to increase the waiting time if you've been made redundant from 13 weeks to 26 weeks, they also want to change the amounts of money that you have in the bank before you're able to access these amounts. I don't have the amounts in front of me, but from memory it was around, I think it was something like $18,000 for a couple. And a lesser amount for a single person, but I need to double check that.
Yeah, that's all right. Patria's just looking them up, and what we have here is that it's $18,000 for a person, for a single person.
Yeah.
So the current threshold would be. Patria's just looking them up, and what we have here is that it's $18,000 for a person, for a single person. So the current threshold would be $5,500 if you're single with no dependents, or $11,000 if you have a partner and you're single with dependents. So what's wrong with the change in your view? Why should people with money in the bank get Newstart?
Well, the reason it's wrong is that, and put yourself in this position, you have worked for 25, 30 years in an industry that is closing down, or you've been made redundant. You get a small redundancy payment, which you can't use to pay off a mortgage or pay that down. So it's sitting in the bank, and I think it is really cruel that the government, and there is no reason other than a cash grab, the government is extending that time and changing the amounts, because that means that you have absolutely nothing to fall back on if there is a medical emergency, if you have to fix up your car, if one of your white goods blows up. There is absolutely nothing for you to fall back on, despite the fact that you've worked for 25, 30, 35, 40 years and paid your taxes your whole life, and this is the way you get treated.
How much public money would the change save? I think the government's saying it would be somewhere around the vicinity of $100 million over 4 years.
Well, $100 million over 4 years in the scheme of things, for such a cruel measure has to be thought about. You'd have to ask the government how much they think they're going to save, but the fact that if you're 55 and you lose your job after 30 years, how difficult it is it going to be to get another job? I mean, the government says, the best form of welfare is a job. Well, yes, a job is fantastic, but you try and get a job when you've got, reasonably set skills from working in the car industry for 30 or 40 years to go out and try and get another job when you're 50 or 55. And what we do know is that the amount of people who are in that age bracket is the largest cohort going on to Newstart.
That is the voice of Linda Burney. She's the Shadow Minister for Families and Social Services. And as you heard Linda allude to, that we do have some questions for the government, and we put in a request for Anne Ruston, the Minister for Families and Social Services. Senator Ruston, Minister Ruston, is not available, unfortunately, today to be able to join us, but we will certainly be following it up over the next few days to see if we can get her to talk to us. Linda Burney, who do you think will be most affected if the change goes through?
The people that will be most affected is the 1 in 4 people on Newstart that are over the age of 55. That's 10,000 people across the country or thereabouts. They will the people that will be most affected because they will have either the redundancy payment or have been able to save a little bit, found themselves, made redundant, and finding it extremely difficult to get another job. Newstart, just imagine what it must do to your psychological well-being if you have been a productive member of society with a steady job for a very long time, and suddenly you find yourself for the first time in your life on a social security payment that is something like 500.
And you're saying to then have to wait for it for 6 months would be unfair.
6 months.
I would like to know if anybody has been in that situation. 0467 922 783. I mean, Newstart's been this way, that the waiting for it for a very, very long time, and now we find that it could be even longer. Well, what is the proposal, Linda Burney? Is it that you have to spend that $18,000 that's in your bank account before you can get it? Or you just...
That's the intention.
Okay.
That you pull into quite desperate situations, quite frankly, and I just don't think it's reasonable to make people run everything they own down and not think there's going to be an emergency.
Are you also concerned about study payments? So I'm thinking of Oz Study. So for years, anyone getting a study allowance loses a lot of that study allowance. So I'm talking about people who are self-funded and studying.
Yes.
They lose a heap of it if they earn any money through work. So, you earn above, say, $100 or something, and next thing you lose half of your study payments. Don't we need to fix that?
There are a number of schedules that if you're on a social security payment, there are a number of them where you can earn a certain amount before it affects that payment. I don't have in front of me that if you're on a social security payment, there are a number of them where you can earn a certain amount before it affects that payment. I don't have in front of me the many schedules, but what you're describing is absolutely right, and that what the really sad situation is that many people who are on Newstart are already desperately trying to do work and have some part-time work, but not enough to get them off the payment, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. So is Labor's policy to fix that?
Oh, yes. We've put a lot of work into the issues around social security.
Yeah.
And one of the really big issues, and I know some of the regions that you cover, and that is the enormous challenges. And don't get me wrong, I believe in mutual obligation, and if you're getting taxpayer funded payment, then there has to be some mutual obligation. But I do think there needs to be a very serious look at the complexity of applying for a social security payment, up to 40 pages in some instances, and also the compliance regime and whether or not it is making it impossible for people to actually get a job.
Should Newstart be increased?
Labor believes that Newstart should be increased. We took to the election, as you're probably aware, a policy to review Newstart, and you don't review something with a view to lessening it. And there is an enormous campaign. I don't think you can look through the papers, and there is a real argument that the rate of Newstart is in fact inhibiting people from getting a job, not assisting.
How much does it need to increase by?
Well, the amount that ACOS, the Australian Council of Social Services, is advocating is $75 a week. But Labor, and I'm not prepared to do this at this point, it has not put a figure on what we think the increase should be. We want to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible when the time comes to do that. But Labor's position is absolutely to increase the rate of Newstart.
Linda Burney, thank you. We need to get you back on very soon to talk about what is happening with other pension payments, because we know that there was some more news that came out of Senate estimates on that front too. Thank you. Linda Burney is the Shadow Minister for Families and Social Services. So questions in the Senate estimates last night: how many people